Hello and welcome to Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Level 2. This lesson will involve aspects of planetary ascension, personal ascension, also concepts that you are a refinery of light, and that this solar system is a refinery of personality characteristics. Now, first up, to planetary ascension. Now, I've spoken about this in several other lessons, giving forth the idea that we can redefine death, that death, as it has existed for the past several thousand millennia, is actually in unnatural state, and that the type of death which has been experienced, an unconscious death, has been a very unnatural state. Now, I've just made a distinction between different types of death, a conscious death versus an unconscious death. So we must say, what are the two distinctions? What is the characteristics of each one? And in order to answer that, I'm going to refer to the lesson immediate previous to this, that is all about the sun and the sun's beautiful emanations of consciousness, and about how you, as your individual persona, are meant to be a refinery and part of a biofeedback loop, refining the energy that is sent to you from external stimuli, and then sending that energy as consciousness back to the sun. So the answer is that there are, let's say, roughly 3 levels of consciousness that are existing on the planet Earth over here. One level of consciousness is not very conscious at all, right? One level of consciousness is like mid-level consciousness. This is like getting a portion of the signal. So this would be analogous to, say, if you had a camera or a video camera that was only able, if this was recording the entire scene, that would be like taking, one frame every 1/26th of a second. If it only took little tiny snippets, that little snippet and that little snippet there, and maybe a little something in here, that would be like getting part of the vision. Or if you were using the analogy of your eye, it would be like saying if you were looking and you only got to see a little bit of the field of vision, and if all of this area over here were blocked off from you, or let's say if it was more like macular degeneration, where you would be able to see little portions of the view, but then there would be large areas in between that you would simply have as blank spots. Well, this is how many beings, many humans right now, or human consciousnesses on Earth right now, live their lives. They are partially obscured, and the partial obscuration comes from the level of the mind. The installed operating system at the level of the yellow chakra, involved with verbalized conscious thought that has been foisted upon humanity, creates a constantly running, distracting internal dialogue, and prevents most humans during their lifespan from giving real-time broadcasts back to the sun. So basically, it is like saying that because you're constantly talking in your mind all the time, you have difficulty activating your crown chakra and sending the impulses of consciousness of your present experience back to the sun. So what this is like to the sun, the consciousness that resides here, is like receiving tiny little snippets of a person's movie. You get a few seconds here, a few seconds there, a few moments here, a few moments there, but without really the comprehensive view of what is really happening. And so, of course, without the capacity of sending back new and improved signals in order to speak to the signals that have been broadcast to the sun. Because biofeedback is all about this consciousness over here changing in response to the signals that it receives back. And then, of course, there's the level of total consciousness. This is a person whose third eye is activated and their crown chakra is open right up here. And whatever they are experiencing, they're a perfectly clear conduit, sending that experience back to the sun. And the sun, the solar consciousness, is then able to say, oh, I sense that something is happening in that experience, and I will send this as my response. And then, of course, that response gets refined upward and broadcast back, and the entire loop repeats. Now, let's also talk about food, because the same type of feedback loop is happening with food. And when I talk about broadcasts from your life, I'm talking about broadcasts from your senses and from your consciousness, but also broadcasts of the energy that you are ingesting very physically in the form of food that you eat. So I've done a lot of other lessons about the importance of mindful eating, being mindful of the sensations that you're eating, the tastes, the textures, the feeling of it going into your body, and then also, while that food is in your intestines, not allowing it to be stolen by the lower negative thought entities that love to reach into people's intestines and steal their happiness. And so we are now talking about light, the refinery of light, the refinery of consciousness that is your body, and the refinery of consciousness that is the solar system. So in the lesson that I just recorded, the previous lesson to this, I was talking about this basic shape that I draw all the time, the shape of the refinery of your consciousness, where we have this vortex shape. And of course, we have the flowing membrane of death over here. And then I was describing how there are beings that are actually stored in the interstices. These are consciousness beings that have not yet been resolved and circulated back to the beginning so that they may try again at, their incarnation. You could say that those beings that are stuck in those interstices are analogous to the adipose tissue of the universe. These are the fatty stores of the body of the universe, of consciousness as it is coming to know itself. So let's talk about why fat gets deposited in places on the physical body, and then you'll understand more why I call these the fatty stores. So when one is eating fat, first of all, is not simply about consuming too many calories. It is not simply about a question of calories in versus calorie out. That is as simplistic as science tends to break things down and as erroneous as a result. Because remember, science does not even recognize consciousness. I have said this many times before. How much consciousness do you weigh? Let's measure your consciousness. Let's quantify it. Science doesn't do that yet. And so because of that, all of these things that are reliant upon aspects of the presence or absence of consciousness bypass science in their significance. What does it feel like to eat consciously? When you eat consciously, food is going in your mouth and you're chewing. Your thoughts are about that food. You are feeding your true self. What you're actually doing is creating a little recording of that experience of you in that moment, you eating that sandwich. Remember December 25th when I ate that sandwich? It is actually being recorded for yourself in the future. Or you could think of it as being directly broadcast to the sun. That the sun really has lent you that energy for that sandwich in the form of a leaf. Yes, sandwich made from leaf. It is made from the beautiful plants that ingested the sun through their chlorophyll and that ingested that light and turned it into a physical thing. I don't know if enough focus and attention is given to that miracle. I don't know if when people are driving or walking around and they look at plants, if they understand that a miracle is happening right there. Because energy, pure energy, light, consciousness is being turned into physical matter right before your eyes. And so that is one of the first things. Be conscious of the miracle of food. And be aware that this consciousness is on loan. It is something that you are being given so that you can use and then send it back. It's kind of like the sun is saying, here's some of me. Here's a portion of me. Take it, enjoy it, use it well, and tell me what it feels like from down there. And that is ideally how we are meant to live. When I say we, I mean third-dimensional humanoid beings on the planet Earth. That is the system, this whole system, this is what was created. This is what was intended. When people ask about God and the devil and good and evil and what did God intend? This is what God intended. God intended for people, humanoids on Earth, to be 100% connected to their divinity, 100% through the crown chakra. I'm just changing to crown chakra color. Through your crown chakra, 100% connected to their divinity, for there to be no time lag whatsoever in the processing of your earthly experience, and to be in a beautiful divine partnership between, oh, you sent me this energy, well, it felt like this, and please, take that into account when you send more energy. This has everything to do with health and well-being and vitality and consciousness, because literally your ideas come from your food. Now we are talking about those different levels of consciousness, the spectrum of consciousness as it exists on Earth at the moment. So I've spoken to you about the galactic historical reasons for why many people are unconscious. Because here's a nice, beautiful, functioning crown chakra, but many people don't have a functioning crown chakra. For many people, it might only be open maybe that much, like a minimum amount. And then you get a tiny little bit of sunshine coming into your mind, but not very much. And likewise, only a tiny little bit amount is allowed to go back to the sun. So this has a lot of impact on your personal day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience, and also on human culture. This helps us to understand why human culture is in such a poor, desperate state. I mean, literally, Earth, the planet, and part of the topic here is planetary ascension as it relates to your personal ascension. But the planet as a consciousness is engaging in a lot of suffering due to the lack of consciousness of its inhabitants. So this is not just to say that the inhabitants that are unconscious tend to pollute. I mean, that is true. However, even conscious people can pollute. And it's not about how much pollution, like how much you're dumping in the oceans or how much you're running your car. It is about your mind. What emanations are you sending off with your mind? So let's switch to blue as an emanation color. And let's say, here's fear. This person is emanating just a whole lot of fear, anxiety, and chaos, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Those emanations are like a form of mental pollution that is problematic on the planet right now, because the planet is a manifestation machine. Earth is so beautiful, beyond mere eye candy or decoration. Earth performs a function. That function has to do with creating reality. And when we talk about planetary ascension, we're talking about giving birth to a new reality. So the birth of a new dimension is a painting that I'm currently working on. And this over here, this painting that I've used in many lessons, is Birth of a New Dimension, a study. And this is all about Earth's magnetic field, here depicted in blue, changing format into the shape of a flying rainbow lasagna. And in doing so, resolving duality and being able to claim that power as a manifestation machine. Because as I have explained in the past, when humanity became so distorted on a genetic level and was disconnected from properly connecting through its crown chakra over here and began to emit fear emanations, fear and anxiety and disease emanations, that Earth was blocked off or quarantined from being connected to the rest of consciousness in the universe, or consciously connected to it, so that Earth would not be polluting reality with these negative emanations. So one of the aspects of what is going on here is each individual learning to raise their consciousness, not live in fear, and instead create emanations that are of a positive future that one would wish to experience. When we talk about planetary ascension, we are talking about the good dream of the planet. The planet suddenly wakes up out of the bad dream that it's been having. Bad dream of scarcity. Bad dream of violence. Bad dream of rape or victimhood or being exploited or used. And a lot of that being played out on an individual human level. Our lives are the dream of the planet. A lot of that dream or nightmarish reality being played out in each person's individual life is directly related to Earth as a planet's journey of victimhood and then eventual empowerment. Because Earth as a manifestation machine has been either lusted after or held hostage by lower vibrational negative forces that would like to use the power of manifestation to control and dominate others. And that is pretty much the motivation for why humanity was enslaved, for why humanity was degraded in sense of its DNA capabilities and connection to the above, and also why human consciousness was inhibited, why you as an individual were limited in your divine expression of consciousness. Planetary ascension has everything to do with you as an individual thinker and broadcaster of reality changing the content of your broadcasting. So, of course, there's the content of the broadcasting. There's also the quality of the broadcasting. You know, it can be a very good broadcast, but if it's only coming through in tiny little dribs and drabs, then it is just not of a high quality broadcast that can be properly perceived by higher consciousness. So guess what? Your alimentary tract is currently being repurposed. It's currently being used for something that it was not originally designed for. Yes, believe it or not, your alimentary tract was not originally designed to be a long, twisty, windy repository for 3 to 5 pounds of ride-along bacteria to accompany you throughout your life. And I am referring now to your gut, in your intestines, the bacteria that are absolutely essential as partners in your life for digesting food. That if you didn't have all of these little tiny bacteria in there, lower vibrational consciousnesses that you're in partnership with, you wouldn't be able to refine out the energy that exists in solid matter. And with this, we can go into a fascinating discussion of how do we define self? Because you've got 3 to 5 pounds of ride-alongs with you. Like I want to say, riding along partners. You've got 3 to 5 pounds of tiny little consciousnesses that exist within your belly that aren't you. They don't share the same genes as you. They don't, when you raise your right arm, they don't all raise their right arm. They are little tiny bacteria, and all they want to do is eat and digest the food that you put into them. And yet, they are absolutely connected to, I'm using orange here, your feelings. They're connected to your emotions. They're connected to your nourishment. They're connected to, changing to green here, because green is a color of unconditional love and heart. They're connected to your heart. So when people are having digestive issues, when people are having the inability to absorb nutrients through their intestines, it is often a lack of love, a lack of unconditional love. And I have defined unconditional love in the past as not merely an airy-fairy notion of affection between mammals, but actually the tone that is achieved when there is an equal and sustained exchange of energy. And so you are having a love relationship with the sun when you give back an equal amount as the sun is giving to you. And that means when you're eating that sandwich, you are giving back to the sun the sensation of eating that sandwich. And that's because you're actually giving it to yourself in the future. You will become this beautiful solar consciousness. I spoke about it very briefly at the introduction of this lesson, that this is about the solar system as a refinery. So if this is the sun at the center and then you have all of the other planets going outward from the solar system, yes, this entire thing is a chakra system, and this entire thing is a refinery, just like you as an individual are a refinery. And what you do is take the solid matter, the solidified matter of plants or animals that have eaten plants, and chew it up and put it inside of your cauldron here and refine out the consciousness. So I've already spoken about this at length in other lessons. Some food contains more consciousness than others. Some food contains greater intensity of light, and that is food that also has greater intensity of nutrition. And that, of course, there's also food that contains very little consciousness. And again, science doesn't recognize or make a value distinction between those two aspects, conscious versus unconscious. Science looks at caloric content, and science looks at people who are fat as simply having eaten too much caloric content. But what really happened when people who are fat or overweight ate, they did not control their mind. Changing to a third eye color. They did not control their third eye. Instead of looking at the realities that they wanted to look at, their third eye was pulled to the side, and they fed their distorted personality. So this might have felt like eating and, talking about being very angry at someone or doing inner grumblings, I hate so-and-so is so bad, or even eating while watching the news, eating while reading the bad news of the day, and all of that nutrition, instead of all of that beautiful solar consciousness coming into you and feeding you, all of that beautiful sandwich feeding your true self, instead you tasted those nutrients minimally, and you frittered away the energy to the periphery because you were thinking about Syria, or you were afraid if you would have enough money to pay your electric bill, or you were distracted by the neighbor's dog, or you were distracted by any, negative, lower vibrational thoughts. Essentially, you had that sandwich stolen from you. But the aspects that were stolen from you were only the aspects that were valued in the energetic realm. Energy. So we're talking about this original light that came down and solidified and became consciousness. That energy was stolen, but the calories remained. So the calories get to build up all around you. And because the non-physical beings, these beings here who are stuck in the interstices, they don't need physical calories. They don't need aspects of food that are physical. They need aspects of food that are non-physical, but not quite as high vibration as unconditional love. So it's like saying these guys can only exist because vibrations lower than unconditional love exist in the world. I am trying to say that these beings would not have anything to eat at all if every individual human being was a perfectly clear conduit that was always sending back their experience of eating and digesting to the sun consciousness in real time. That world existed. It is remembered currently by the current social time as Atlantis or Lemuria. It's remembered as a somewhat mythical or dreamlike reality, or possibly the Garden of Eden, when people lived in perfect harmony and perfect balance with nature, and people didn't have to kill plants and animals in order to eat. This is also reflected in mythological stories of gods who eat the food of the gods. They eat ambrosia, or some of the saints who were known for their saintly charismas, to exist on nothing but pure sunlight, or nothing but the Eucharist, or nothing but pure emanations of divine love and divine consciousness. Well, I am here to tell you that that is not just a one-off. That is not just a solitary, unusual example. That is actually what everyone is supposed to be living like. That is what you were designed to live like. So when I say that your alimentary tract has been repurposed, this big, beautiful, long tube was never intended to hold a bunch of, dirty bacteria and chew, digest, masticate, chew up physical beings and then, shoot them out the other end. When you ascend, and you will, you get to the other side of this experience, you will look back on who you were and the experience that you were having as a third dimensional human on Earth. And you will be amazed. You will be amazed that you used to like to take, chickens or dandelion leaves and grind them up with your teeth and actually swallow them into the center of your being, and then allow digestive secretions to break it down into its fibers. But of course, what I've just described is the experience of having a lovely human meal. So for many reasons, when you eat, it is absolutely essential to savor what you eat. Make recordings now of those delicious aspects of eating with a tongue, with taste buds, and with your alimentary tract, because eventually you will evolve to the point where you do not eat anymore. Now, when I tell people about this, they become very afraid. Oh no, I'm afraid of loss. I'm afraid of loss of pleasure. But wait, I enjoy eating sandwiches and I want to enjoy things. And I'm trying to say that you do not lose enjoyment at all, but you experience enjoyment differently. So instead of physically putting the food in your mouth and grinding it up and physically putting it in your body, what happens is you experience a mental recording. For those of you who are science-minded, imagine that I have glued a lot of sensitive electrodes to a person's skull, and I have made an incredibly adept recording on this magical machine over here of the exact brain waves when one is eating a sandwich. And then, now that I've got this recording, I don't have to ever make or manufacture or eat sandwiches ever again. All I have to do is play back the recording of experiencing a sandwich, and then I will be totally satiated. Well, this is very similar to the way that nourishment and nutrition is extracted and exchanged at higher dimensional levels. Nutrition at higher dimensional levels in hyperspace is all about consciousness. What higher dimensional beings eat is consciousness, pure consciousness. So higher dimensional beings do not need the intermediary of a leaf in order to absorb consciousness. So what would that feel like as an individual, being an ascended being and not needing the intermediary of a leaf? It would be very, very similar to being a plant, where when the sun or solar consciousness or stellar consciousness, because this can be considered emanations from stars other than just Sol in our solar system, when these stellar emanations are out, you put out your collectors, your solar collectors, just like plants put out leaves, and you absorb that consciousness and make it a part of yourself, and that there is no need for this intermediary of this plant absorbing consciousness and then you absorbing the plant. And it is a very enjoyable sensation. It's not like, now that I've sat out in the sun, I feel like going and having a big sandwich. It's like, no, this is the sandwich. And it is like having a beautiful meal or a beautiful banquet of consciousness. And what one experiences during that banquet of consciousness is not only, like I was saying, the sensations, the recorded sensations of, yes, remember when you used to have a body and eat food, but also new ideas, new possibilities, new timeline, that you are fed with hopes and greater understanding about the future. You can be fed with insight. You can be fed with new ideas. You can be fed with the joy of a creative project. It's a different level of food. So now I have 3 more minutes left on this particular segment. I want to get back to what I keep talking about here, this adipose tissue. So in your own career of eating, when you eat, it is essential for you to consciously direct all of that nutrition and nourishment to your true self, to your core self, to your bones and your skeletal muscles and your organs, and not to big, fatty deposits where that energy is stored up. Because what really happens when you direct energy towards fatty storage, it's just like saying, I can't deal with that consciousness right now. I just put consciousness in my mouth. I can't think about it or deal with it right now, so let's just stack up consciousness over here. Keep on stacking up consciousness over here. And when people go on a pilgrimage and they walk a lot, or when people do marathon training, triathlon training, and they train a lot, what they're doing is finally taking this energy out of storage, burning it as calories, and circulating it out. And what we're talking about with the universe here is on a planetary ascension level, it is time to take this energy here out of storage, burn it, or utilize it, and circulate it out. And these consciousnesses here, these are known as demonic presences. I mean, they have been mythologized as being, evil beings, demonic presences. I call them lower vibrational, negative service to self beings, but I'm just being very impeccable with my language. And these fatty deposits have existed for eon. For an eon. So beginning with the next segment, I'm going to talk about how the eon shifts, how these blockages become digested and released, what that means to you, what that means to the planet. Thank you very much.